What's up, everybody? I am back. Did you miss me? Probably not too much. Alright, so we've already got 15 people watching here. I have teams all ready to receive the calls. Let's see where we're at. So how many of you guys, I posted a video before we left on our little vacation last week, saying if you guys tried out the, I'm like multitasking on my words. God. Anyways, how many of you guys have actually tried out the 2.11 beta release of the Unified 2 on your 8-bit boards? Has anybody tried that? Sound is low. Oh yeah, it is a little, looking at my meters here. Hang on. I'm willing to bet something screwed with my, yep. And we should be good now. Something always screws with my volume on my microphone at the Windows device level. It was set to 40. I usually keep it at about 80. And for some reason, it was set very low. Trying to find here. I changed my microphone on Teams also to, oh, you know what? It's Teams. Because as soon as I changed it, I gotta change it back. Sound settings. Yep. Teams keeps screwing with my mic volume. That's why this microphone's always low. So I'm just gonna leave this as the one that I'll use if someone calls in, and you guys will be able to hear their voice, and this microphone will pick up my voice as well. So what's everybody been up to? Anything new in the 3D printing scene? I know there was VRF going on the weekend we were leaving, so not last weekend, the weekend before that, the 10th and the 11th. I did catch some parts of it. Did anybody watch VRF? Let's see. I'm having horizontal lines on my prints on some layers. Any hints are appreciated. If you send me some pictures to streams at th3dstudio.com, I can take a look. But horizontal lines can be caused by a multitude of different options. The most common one, however, is if your Z is binding up. So, you know, you got the lead screw that traditionally, it could be something else, but most printers, the ones that we deal with anyways, have lead screws. But if the lead screw is binding up, it could cause the layers to not be even and uniform. So you'll get like bulging, or some layers will be not as tall as the others, as they should be, or they'll be too tall. And basically what happens is if your lead screw is binding and your printer tells it to move up like 0.2 millimeters, and it only moves up like 0.18 because it physically can't move that 0.2 smoothly, then you'll get where the nozzle is actually 0.02 millimeters too low. Now these are just hypothetical numbers, but the point is that if your Z is binding up, it's not going to move correctly. So usually what I'll do to correct it, if it is an issue with the Z rod, first check by moving it by hand up and down. Sometimes it can bind up throughout the whole length of the lead screw, and other times it can bind up at certain spots, which can make it even harder to troubleshoot. Now, on like Creality machines, one thing you can do is leave the little screws that hold the brass nut to the bracket just a little bit loose, not tight, not super loose, but just a little bit. So tighten down and back them off like a half turn so that nut can actually float a little bit, because if your lead screw is not perfectly straight, it can also cause binding too. The easiest way to check for binding if your lead screw is the issue is take it off the printer and put it on a flat surface and roll it, and it should sound uniform. It should just be a nice smooth even sound. But if you hear like a whoop whoop whoop, like that kind of noise, then you know your lead screw is bent. If it's really bent, you should probably look at replacing it. The most common issue is the lead screw. Now, on printers like the Ender 3 or the CR10, those kind that use the V-slot wheels, if your eccentric nut is too tight, that can also cause binding and cause the gantry to hang up. So if the motor can't move up because there's too much pressure on the wheels squeezing the two uprights, then you'll get binding as well. So you need to start with the mechanical portion. It's very rarely an issue with the wiring or the electronics. It's usually a physical issue on the machine, not a electrical issue. Michael Hunt, cigar fridge not present. Oh, I moved it into the house because it gets too cold in here overnight. I keep the heat really low so we're not wasting energy. It's in the house, don't worry. I just heard noises coming from the garage over there. I don't see anybody, so let's see. I'm not sure you mean, is it Fly Sky FSI6? I don't know what you mean by that, Nadav. I am not sure. I'm going to Google that. Oh, the controller. No, that's a Spectrum DX6. This thing he's asking about. All right. You guys are awful quiet today. I scheduled this stream here. It's on the new Artillery Genius. Yeah, check the frame too. I'm checking here, participants. I don't have anybody coming in on Teams, so if you want to call in, you can go to asktim.th3dstudio.com and there's a link you can join through Teams if you're on a computer or a mobile device that has cameras. Or if you want to call in through a phone, there's a number and a conference bridge number that will allow you to call in, and then you'll be on the show here. I don't have too much new going on right now in ways of TH3D. We just got back from vacation, so I'm just kind of getting back in and going through all the day-to-day stuff. So, but I'll be jumping back into doing some firmware dev. I will be sending over the final firmware for our Easy Plugs to the manufacturer on Friday. I just have a few little things left to do, but we're very close. I'm hoping to get those launched. Let's see here. Film Factory says, why is my new reel PLA after print next day? It's cracked and broken off the spool. I have that happen, and actually I'll show you guys what he means because I have a roll that does this. So this is why we stopped buying Overture PLA. So this has just been sitting here, and if you look, yeah, do you see that? It cracks, and the answer is this is just crap quality PLA. It prints nice, but if your PLA is cracking like that, and you can see, I just touched it and it just unspooled. So now I'm gonna have to re-spool this. So if that happens to you, this is what I do because I don't want to get a tangle. I'll take it off and then see if it's binding up at all. Okay, and then re-spool it back on. The bottom line is it's low quality PLA. There's really no other way. There's no way to fix it. Unfortunately. So, but this is why I stopped buying Overture, because it was doing the same thing yours has. And you saw here, this was just, I literally pulled this off my shelf, and it just cracks. Your filament shouldn't do that just from sitting. It should not. And I've never had coax filament do that, or printed solids, Jesse PLA. I've never had higher quality filaments do that. I've only had the cheaper stuff. I've only had the cheaper stuff that is like this. I mean, Overture, it's okay for the price, but I'm not going to buy it again because it cracks all the time. I had a roll sitting on here, and every day after the print would be done, it'd be cracked. So, yeah, it's just a problem with the PLA. You're more likely to have it with the cheaper brands. I've only ever had it with the cheaper brands. I've never had it with the stuff that's made in the US, like I said, like Coax or the Jesse PLA from Printed Solid or Atomic. It can happen to anyone, but you're more likely to have it on a brand that's got lower prices and lower QC and that kind of stuff. Let's see here. Michael Wright. Hey Tim, I have a CR10 with the Easy Board, Easy Out, Easy ABL. I'm running Octoprint. When my filament goes out, my printer pauses. I do the change I do the change, but when I push the control knob to continue, nothing happens. Works fine when using SE to print. Will I have to move filament sensor out over the Raspberry Pi? No. It really depends on what firmware you're using. If you're using an older release, try updating to the newer one and reset your EEPROM. There was a bug in the I have to look at our change log. But there was a bug in the older firmware when we moved, not the Unified 2, where the version number is just 2 point whatever. Or sorry, I need more caffeine today, apparently. So in the older Unified 2, so Unified 2 came out and it was just for the Easy board. We had planned to roll other boards into that, but we renamed it, made it a little simpler. But the version number where it was like U2.R1. Whatever, that one did not have any bugs with filament change. However, some of the earlier versions of the Unified 2 with the version that was just 2 point and then some numbers like 2.01, 2.02, there was a bug, and it was when it was based on Marlin 2061 that the change filament procedure was just buggy. It worked sometimes, it didn't work other times. So let's see here. I'm looking at the change. I'm gonna pull up the change log. But the latest one has it fixed. There were issues with the change filament, and it was discovered from the LCD menu. That was the one. So Unified 2.1 is what you want to be using. I have on the notes here. Let me move this over. Hang on. I like minimize all my crap here. I got so much crap. All the crap. Main monitor. There we go. So you see here Unified 2, 2.10, which if you use the easy firmware site, that's on the latest one. But you can see here fixed filament change not working. That was a fix that was applied in that one. So try updating to that and report back. That's the only one I'm aware of where there was actually a bug. So if you are not if you're on an older version, older than 2.1, then update, and that should fix that issue. I use the Easy board here with a filament sensor and Octoprint and run out of filament all the time. I never have a problem. One thing to note, though, there are some plugins for Octoprint that like display, they use like the M117. The M117 G code is to send text to the LCD on the printer. And it'll use that to display like what your ETA is, how long it is left. And there was one plugin we had that was not smart enough to realize when the filament was out and the printer was waiting, so it just kept sending M117 commands for hours. So when you would start it back up and change your filament, if you look at the LCD screen, it's just scrolling through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of messages, and the printer is not going to print until it gets through that backlog of messages that were queued up by that Octoprint plugin. So I think it was like a status screen one, but check your Octoprint plugins. If you have one that's using that feature of the firmware, which is the M117 command, basically if you have a plugin that sends a message to your printer's LCD screen, it could just be that it's got a bunch of commands backed up, and it's going to process. So if you let it sit there for a couple of minutes, it'll eventually get through that queue and then resume printing. We had that issue, and we stripped that plugin out of the ones on our farm because we'd start a print before the end of the day. They go, well, it'd run out of filament overnight. You come back in the morning, put filament in, and it takes like 5 minutes for the printer to actually start printing again because it had all these M117 commands queued up from that Octoprint plugin. And I put this, I was seeing if I could put like my YouTube status thing like as a pop out here. Oh, here we go. Okay. Yeah, I am seeing buffering on YouTube here. It's YouTube though. It's actually not Comcast this time. Surprisingly. I have no drop frames over the network, so if you guys are getting buffering, it's because of YouTube. Let's go on here. Do you have a list of printers that TH3 supplies accessories and firmware? So we create a category for most of the machines. It's actually on my to-do list to actually create categories for other printers. I've got notes here for other machines that we carry parts for, but we don't have a separate category for. If you message our support to use the live chat or email and let them know what printer you have and what you're looking to do with it, they'll be able to get you the right parts too. As for the Sunlu S8, I have one of those sitting in the box here, and we'll be doing an unboxing on that this week. I don't think it's going to be tomorrow. It'll probably be Wednesday after the Ask Tim. So after the Ask Tim, I'm probably going to do a stream. Well, not probably. I am. Wednesday evening around like 6 p.m. Central Time. I'm going to be doing a stream on the Sunlu S8. So we have plans to actually do that. It's been sitting here for a couple months. I got a deal on it for like $200. For what you're saying, it's on sale for $189. I haven't opened it. It's still sealed, but that's not bad. I don't know if it's good printer, how much work it's going to need, but a printer with that build volume for $189 is not a bad deal, even if it sucks, because you can always build on it. Let me see here. Blasto Supreme asks, so you know how I did my printer refit on my Mini? I think he said, him and I were talking offline, I think he's doing like a control box delete. I did the Easy ABL sub last time. My Z offset was -1. That sound okay to you? I've always used -1 or something. So here's the thing: if you set up the sensor and calibrate it per our documentation, your Z offset should be in the -2 range. But if it's working and you're getting a good M48 result, it really doesn't matter what your Z offset is. The reason we have specific mounting heights, having the sensor higher than the nozzle and calibrating the adjustment with the nozzle a certain millimeter off the bed, is because we're putting that sensor's detection range into the optimal detection range where it gets its best accuracy. So if you're not getting a good M48 result, then I would recommend going back through the manual and recalibrating the sensor per the guide, just so you're actually running it within specifications. Jeff Calhoun, question: when I calibrate flow rate, do I need to do it for each layer height? No, you don't. Flow rate is just, I'm assuming you're talking about flow rate. You can either do it in the slicer. Some people mess with their steps per millimeter. I've said before, I don't mess with my steps per millimeter. I get it to a number that I know is good for that specific extruder because it doesn't vary much, and then I'll play with the flow rate on my slicer if I need to. Also, do you increase the minimum layer time on thinner layer heights? No, I don't. I run the same ones. You could actually, if you think about it, you could probably decrease it because there's less physical plastic to cool. So in theory, it should cool down, but you should. The short answer is no and no. You don't need to change it for each layer height. You don't need to do it for each layer for thinner layers. Moni says, I've had several brands do it when sitting. They're talking about the cracked filament. Yeah, the Overture, this stuff is the only one I've ever had do it on me. This is the only brand I've had that's done it. It can happen to anyone, but I've seen other people have issues with some of the cheaper ones. One of my buddies has eSun, and his eSun cracked just from being on the printer for a while. Like if I'm just printing this and eating these up continuously, meaning the printer's just constantly running parts off, I don't usually have an issue with it cracking. It's when it sits in the same position for a while. So it could be humidity related. It could be not. I would assume it's probably humidity related. If it's getting drier and whatever is in there, someone mentioned something, an additive that evaporates off and lower humidity, that would make sense because then it'd make it more brittle and crack. But in my experience, the higher end plastics, like I've got rolls of coax that are over a year old sitting out, not even in a bag, and they never crack. 3D Solutec is a Chinese brand, so I'm not surprised. Yeah, Nearman 3D printing. PLA also has olefins, I probably said that wrong, added during spool extrusion process that evaporates when you leave it in the open and dry climate. Yeah, we're getting into dry climate here now. We're in Indiana in the Midwest here in the U.S., and it's starting to get drier out. Is YouTube freezing or is it my connection? It's YouTube. I'm not. We're actually good sending out here, so I guess YouTube's having issues sending back to you guys. Scott Latine, welcome back from vacation land. It was nice, but I'm not gonna lie. Around Thursday, I was like, man, I want to work on some stuff. I may have a problem. Omer asks, TL smoothers on the CR6 SE thoughts? No. That has trinamic drivers on it. The trinamic drivers don't need smoothers unless you really screwed up the implementation of them. Not you, but the company making the board. Rob, I just answered that. Yeah, I would say if you guys are getting buffering, just pause the video and let it buffer a little bit. But for once, Comcast is actually running correctly, so... I was thinking about doing our own streaming system through our website. I don't know how that would work, but I was thinking about it. To just kind of get off of YouTube. Joshua Garrison says, I think it might be... Oh, he's talking about I think it might be the upload on Tim's side. I'm just 30 seconds behind the live feed, and that helped my problem. No, since then. Yeah, if you see here, you guys might be able to see it, but you can see here I've dropped no frames going out to YouTube here. So it's got to be something with YouTube. I'm sure their platform is just getting hammered right now. Come on, keep the questions coming. That's the whole point of this. You can ask questions about anything 3D printing related. It doesn't even have to be about our products. Literally anything 3D printed related. If it's resin printing, I'm not an expert on resin printing. But if it's FDM, I can probably answer your question. Let's look at the chat here. I'm going to see if I missed anything. Nope. You guys are awful quiet today. Is this going to be a short stream? Because if we don't get any people asking questions... Because for once, I don't have a ton of stuff to talk about because I was out for a week. Come on, people. Throw me some questions here. If you see me looking over here, like right now, I have chat on my left screen. I mean, if we don't get any questions, I'm gonna wrap the stream up. Oh, I do actually have something to talk. So I have talked with Joe from Project R3D, and we're thinking about doing the Friday stream with him and I on like around 6 p.m. Central Time, and it'll be a casual hangout. We'll talk about what's happened during that week in the 3D printing world, based on like different topics we find and people send us, and then also have like a Q&A session. It'll probably be about an hour and a half, 2-hour stream. So Havoc Shooter, the shipping prices, they are probably... So our site pulls USPS's API, and according to the link from ShipStation, they rolled out the higher prices already. It was like 24 cents a package for first class, and I think 40 cents a package for priority is what I saw. So it's not a ton, but they're still charging more. It's like a holiday surcharge. Joshua, is there a way to export your settings from the latest firmware? I always forget if I had to reverse one of those access. So there's no way to like get your settings back. You can, the closest thing you can do is do an M503, and that'll give you like your steps per millimeter and acceleration and jerk values, your probe offset, that kind of stuff. But in terms of what motors need to be reversed or not, that's not something the M503 outputs. Let's see here. Oh, I'm sorry, Gabriel. Will the solid bed mounts finally fix my bed level issue for my Sear10S Pro? I have you sync the Z rods and they're leveled. I'm not sure. It depends on what other things are going on your machine. Like, do you still have their stock sensor? Because a lot of people had issues with their stock sensor, including myself. We have one of our kits on there now. And it's been running great. It's actually a decent machine, to be honest. But no, all the solid bed mounts do is replace your spring. So if it's not functioning right now, with whatever ABL system you have on there, whether it's a stock one or ours, there's something else that needs to be addressed. Hans says, I have an Ender 3. I have an Ender 3, switch to the new glass coated bed. I'm getting a lot of lifting. Do I need some settings? So, I'm assuming you got their textured one, which I'm not a fan of those surfaces in general because they do lift. You can try printing slower, reduce your first layer speed, up the temperature that you're printing at least for the first layer by 10 to 15 degrees Celsius, so the plastic is more molten, so it's more prone to stick to the plate. And then I would run, for PLA, I would run a temperature of 60 C for the bed. Now, I have never had good luck with those using ABS. ABS does not like sticking to it. You'd have to use an adhesion promoter like the Vision Miner nanopolymer. That's something that would stick it down. That'll stick down pretty much any filament to any bed with the correct temperature settings. And if you're doing ABS, you need an enclosure. There's actually a video on the channel about that, but I'm assuming you're doing PLA. Most people do PLA. Let's see here. Shipping price, I already answered that one. Gabriel is waiting to see your... I see you posted your question again. The answer is no, it will not fix your level issues. I need more information so I can give you more things to look at. Like I said, what sensor you're using, is it the stock one, is it ours, is it BL Touch, that kind of stuff. Oh, there you go. So you have the BL Touch. So what is the leveling issue that you're having? Like, what is the issue? Because telling me you're having a leveling issue doesn't really give me any information to go on. Like, what's the end result of the problem? And I'll come back as you put more stuff in chat. I'm just going to go through the list here. You guys are answering questions or putting questions in. Thank you. Let's see. Is there a better than stock fan for the Ender 3 that is more powerful with the same form factor as stock? Which fan? I'm assuming you're talking about the layer fan, because that's usually one that people replace. I'm just going to assume it's the layer fan. We'll see. I'm waiting for your confirmation, Jeff. What's your ideal 3D printer? There's really not one. It really depends on what I'm going to be printing. Now, if we're talking about an all-arounder, I've said this before, like my Ender 3 is my go-to machine if I'm printing PLA or PETG. And to be honest, having trinamic drivers isn't a must because I don't mind the noise. But an ideal 3D printer is one that's easy to work on. You know, it just works. I can throw filament in and get a print out. But like my Ender 3 right there, that's fully kitted out with all our stuff. The Easy Board, the Dual Z kit, our Easy Flex, our Tough Extruder, the Tough Tube, and then I've got a 5015 fan on there with the stock hot end. I actually didn't replace the hot end, just replaced the tubing. But I mean, my ideal printer has auto bed leveling. It has a filament sensor. It has a nice extruder that's got a guided filament path. So it's more like I could better answer that in like what feature set do I like on my machines. So, and that would be it. Let's see here. Jeff, I haven't gotten an answer from you. Jeff Colhoun. Or Calhoun. I'm probably saying your last name wrong. My apologies. I'm just going to assume that you're talking about the layer fan. The short answer is not really. We do carry fans that replace the stock layer fan that are the same form factor, and they're only slightly better than the stock one in terms of airflow. In terms of longevity, they'll last a lot longer. They're dual ball bearing fans. So, but to be completely honest with you, if you want better layer fan performance, you're going to have to print a replacement mount like a Hero Me or a Pet's Fang or any other, take your pick of the ones on Thingiverse, and go with a 5015 fan. The 5015 layer fan is my go-to. They put out a ton of air, and you can even run them at lower speeds if you don't need a ton of air. I run all mine at 100%. I don't mind a little extra noise. Just trying to catch back up on chat. Sup, Chris Travis? Okay, Alfred, or Vernon Alred said, I have the SV01. If I put the SD card in, it will not recognize, so I have to try and print through my laptop. What's with that? I'm assuming you've tried another card. If you haven't, try another card. Make sure that card is formatted as FAT32 file system, and there's only one partition on that card. Assuming you've ruled out all the cards being the issue, you've tried multiple cards, different brands, make sure the cards are 32 gigabytes or less. In general, most of these printer boards like smaller cards, so like 1 gig, 8 gig, 4 gig, that kind. You can use 32s, but that's the upper limit. I would recommend going with smaller cards for G-code. The files aren't that big anyways. But if no cards work at all, and you have firmware on there that's correctly set up, so if you flash our firmware or their stock firmware, and it's still not reading the card, you can try hitting initialize or mount. It depends on what version of Marlin you have on there, but there's usually a line that says mount SD card or something along that matter. If it will not mount, then you probably have a bad SD slot. So, and there's actually videos on this channel where I've replaced SD slots. I actually keep spare SD slots in my thing in case they get broken by either a customer or on our machines. But they don't break on our machines because we don't use the slots. So I could have defective SD slots and have no idea, but we don't print over SD. We do everything with Octoprint. That's another thing. If you don't want to mess around with the board and don't care if the slot's bad, you can always put you could also do Octoprint and then just print over USB and just forget that the slot exists. Film Factory. Advice on printing a small part without it coming off the bed other than a raft or brim. I'm assuming you already have the basics covered, which is your Z height is set, your bed's level, etc. Vision miner. No joke. I've brought this. I feel like this comes up every other Ask Tim at the very least. I usually have a bottle floating around here, but I cleaned up, so I think it's somewhere over there. But the Vision Miner nanopolymer, that stuff is amazing. Assuming you have your Z height correct and all that other basic stuff, I would put money on it that it will keep it on there. Because I've thrown it on parts, or I put it on my bed when I have a bunch of little ones, and I'm like, I don't know if this is gonna come off, but I don't want to risk it. This stuff right here. So, and there's, like I said before, there's a big bottle and there's a small bottle. I really like this stuff, legitimately like this stuff. We used it for over a year before we started carrying it. We started carrying it because we use it. So, I got Vernon's here. Neerman says, isn't autobed leveling easy but worse for print quality because of the motion, because of the Z motion, the balance and unevenness? In theory, you could have variations because it is moving it up and down. There is features in Marlin called Z fade where it actually fade out that compensation. But the reality is it's so small you're not going to notice it. If at all. I've never noticed it. And as long as your Z axis is moving correctly, you're not going to have problems with it. The only time you'll have problems is if your Z is binding up and it's trying to make those compensations and it can't. You'll get some really weird results. 3D print Viking, will you help me come carry stuff for my move? I'm good. On small parts, so if you know what you can do, and I've done this before, because I have some that are weird. When you print a small part, print 2 of them. So if you're worried about the cooling time, just put a second one on the bed. That way the head has to move from the one to the other, so you just naturally then get more cooling time. And then you have an extra part. Larry, sorry I missed your question here. I've missed actually Larry and Omer's. Omer asking, is there TH3D software coming to the CR6 SE? There's not one planned at this time. I might not do much in terms or anything in terms of firmware for that one. But I do have one, and it's all working. So I might, but there's no plans for it officially right now. I'm not a huge fan of that printer, and to be honest, I don't trust it after seeing all the board issues and whatnot, but I have it so we can revisit it at a later time. Larry says, have you looked at the Micro Swiss direct drive extruder for the CR10 Ender series? I've looked at them. I know people that have them, and they really like them. Micro Swiss in general makes pretty good stuff. So if you're looking for a simple direct drive kit, their stuff is pretty well put together, and from what I've seen, it's pretty easy to put on too. They have everything pretty well thought out. Let's see. Gabriel says Bondtech Direct Drive. Also, oh, he's got Bondtech Direct Drive. Also, I love the bed, and when I begin printing, the middle of the bed is always lower. It ends up printing in the air. Could a carriage be bent? I would check and see what your mesh looks like. There's websites called there's like a web, I think it's like Lockster or something. I'm trying to find the page here. There's a plugin for Octoprint, and I'm trying to find the mesh bed visualizer. This is a new one. I think it was like Lockster's main one. So you could put in your G29 coordinates and get like a visual representation here. And if it looks really weird, then you could be getting interference. You have a direct drive and you have BL Touch, and the BL Touch has zero shielding on the cabling. So it could be picking up interference from the the motor. If you have Octoprint, there's a plugin called Bed Visualizer that does the same thing. Let's see here. Artisan Plumbing HVAC. Getting rid of flash and ANET ET4 tomorrow so I can better tune settings. Never gone that deep. Any tips on learning how to work on the printer's firmware? I haven't done that machine yet, but it does involve using an ST-Link programmer. I have them, and it's on my to-do list. I have a very long to-do list. The ANETs, unfortunately, are at the bottom of that because they haven't been super popular. But there are good guides out there on how to flash Marlin on that with the ST-Link. The downside of that machine is because their bootloader is weird is the best way I can describe it. You can't update over SD, which is unfortunate because that board has the capability to do it if they just had a different bootloader on there. That one's going to definitely be more involved for people because you have to plug that physical programmer in to just set the firmware on the board. But just follow the directions that are out there for that machine. There's a lot of good ones already out there. There's a lot of videos too. And just make sure you hit every single step. Make sure all your connections are good. And then if you're having issues with your computer, reboot it. Because sometimes programs just get hung up in the background or process gets stuck. And a restart will fix that. Do we ship to the UK? Yes, we do. What's your favorite slicer? I like Simplify 3D. I like the software. I'm kind of weary about the company, but their software works. So I am trying to figure out what other slicer we want to get into that is similar to S3D. I really like S3D's workflow and their layout, which is why I don't like Cura, is because it's very kludgy. Like with different printers and profiles, it's not, and this is all my opinion, but it's not as intuitive and straightforward as Simplify 3D. I also like Simplify 3D supports, but I've heard that Cura's is getting better. They have their new tree supports and stuff. So Fenrix is saying, I'm about to start putting together my Ender 5 Plus, installing EasyBoard while I'm at it. Any tips and things to look out for? Again, take your time, read the documentation. Don't do a ton of upgrades at one time. Do one upgrade at a time. A lot of people make the mistake especially new people. Like, obviously, I can go through and rip a printer apart and put a bunch of upgrades on and be good. But if you're newer, do one upgrade at a time, make sure everything's working, and then move on to the next one, versus tearing the whole machine apart and like replacing the power supply and the board and the screen and the bed leveling sensor. And, you know, do one thing at a time. Take your time, make sure you're following the directions. I don't know if you're going with the Easy ABL or we're using the BL Touch that's on there, but make sure you go through the manual for the Easy board, because it has all the wiring diagrams for the BL Touch and all the pinouts for your, you know, your hot end connections, your motors. Make sure everything's connected correctly. And for the filament sensor, make sure you put that on the correct direction, because the Creality one plugs in a specific way, and so does ours onto that filament sensor header. The reason we use just a standard 3-pin row of pin headers instead of like a JST is because the plug for our sensor we use is inverse from the Creality sensor, and using those pins allows us to use either or. Luana says, you successfully use linear advance junction deviation S-curve on an Ender 3 with a bound setup. So S-curve acceleration and linear advance do not work together. In the latest versions of Marlin, it actually throws an error if you have both of those enabled. So no, you should not be using S-curve acceleration with linear advance. That should be off. The latest version of Marlin, if I recall correctly, because I was testing all this out, doesn't let you compile if you have both enabled at the same time. Junction deviation is an alternate form of jerk control over the classic jerk that we've all known for many years. I've had a lot of weird movement issues when using junction deviation over classic jerk. So in the latest version of our firmware, we're actually using the classic jerk over junction deviation. And after talking with Scott at Marlin, he prefers the classic jerk as well. And the nice thing about the classic jerk is you can actually set different jerk values for each axis, versus when you use junction deviation, it's one value for all of them. Yeah, I'm familiar with what the S-curve acceleration is, and it's a neat feature, but it is experimental. There's weird little glitches and bugs with it, and it's supposed to allow for quicker ramp up and slow down. But I don't use it anymore. I used it when it first came out. It did allow you to print a little bit faster, but I don't recommend using it because I've had just weird little glitches and bugs with it. There's a reason it's still labeled experimental. I would stay away from it. Just stick with, like, junction deviation with linear advance is okay, but I would stick with not using S-curve acceleration. And like I said, the latest version of Marlin throws an error when you use S-curve and linear advance at the same time, because they're not compatible with each other. Unified bed leveling versus bilinear, which is best? That's all personal opinion. I use bilinear. Unified bed leveling is nice, but I found it very complicated to set up, and honestly, it feels like it's overkill. When I have, like, the machines here have bed leveling sensors on them, so I'll just run a G29 at the beginning of every print, and then I have a fresh mesh, and I go on about my day. Unified bed leveling is more involved. You can go and fine-tune your meshes and adjust individual points and that kind of stuff, and add multiple points. If you want to get that involved with it, go right ahead. But I think it's overkill. Bilinear works great, and if you have an ABL probe, those two together work really well. All right, what else do we got here? Sorry. Lena says, thanks. I have zits, and I think I'll stick to only linear advance. The zits, depending on what you're printing over, could be caused by either your printer's board being too slow to run it, or you could be having issues with, if you're going over USB, with the serial data not being sent to the board quick enough. I'll wait to see what you say you're printing on and what board you have. So you can let me know what board you have and what you're printing over, whether it's SD or USB. Then I can give you kind of further guidance. But if you're, let's say you're using an 8-bit board. If you're using an 8-bit board with linear advance and all these other features, you could be quickly hitting the limitations of the processor and how fast it can actually process the movements. Like when I have on our Ender 3 test machine that I have here, I was doing tests with the 8-bit stock board and then our 32-bit easy board at using the same exact G code for 100 millimeter second benchy with the speeds on cap. So exact same firmware, just different boards. So same acceleration, same jerk, same everything aside just the 8-bit board versus the 32-bit board. And the 8-bit board did do like on straightaways fine at 100 millimeters a second. But once it started getting to the curves, even over SD, because I wanted to remove the USB bottleneck, then it would start choking and you'd get little artifacts on the prints, whereas the 32-bit board just went right through it with no issue. Okay, so you're familiar with like the buffer size settings. Yeah, so the ZIT, since you have that, the board you have, that the 1.4, that's got the LPC 1769, so that's a decent chip. That's what we use on our easy board. And that's not going to be, so it's not a processor limitation, it's likely just a combination of those two features not playing nicely together. Yeah, I saw your video, the Marlin UI. They've been working a lot on the touchscreens, which is good to see. Hopefully we can get some, what's the word I'm looking for? Hopefully we can get some like nicer menu structures for some of these printers, like the Anycubic i3 Mega or the JJ Aurora A5. I don't know how much they're going to be able to do because those are serial communication ones, whereas like the King Runes are driven directly off the processor. But who knows? Maybe we'll see proper firmware for those so we can actually drive those from Marlin and have more control of them. That would be great. David, what's up, David Petzel? David Wilson asks, will you add more features to the online compiler for the EasyBoard? For example, M600 changes and thermal runaway times. I'm not sure what you mean by M600 changes. I'm assuming you're talking about load and unload lengths. You can change those from the LCD on that board. There is that option in the menus because there's enough space on there. As for thermal runaway, we have those set at a set value, and the next release is going to have them a little more conservatively set because we did have a couple people, I think you were one of them, that had like a false thermal runaway trigger. And we did make them a lot more aggressive in the last release, but I made them a little too aggressive. So we're going to be throttling those back a little bit where they're still useful, but they're not going to have as high a chance of false triggering. Chris, how's documentation for? I mean, oh, so Chris has the 8-bit one. I got back. I haven't had a chance to work on it any further. It's on my to-do list for this week. My goal is to get out the 8-bit and the 2.1.1 release, and then get all the Creality printers that use their Melzi board ported over, and then in the next release get like the ANETs in there, that kind of stuff. My plan is by the end of the year we have Unified 1 completely retired, and the machines that we still want to support from Unified 1 moved into 2, so Unified 1 can just be left there for a few machines. Like I don't think I'm going to port over the Wanhao i3 Plus, so that one can stay on Unified 1. That's not a huge popular model, and that firmware works great on that machine, and it's kind of a unique case because that machine has that DWin touchscreen, which is closed source, and yeah. Yeah, you can try to lower your speeds. Try that first and see what happens. Erdu, dumbish question. With the EasyBoard, all you need to get a filament sensor is that, yeah, so if you just get our sensors, so the two sensors that work and are supported officially on the EasyBoard is our Easy Out sensor, which you just need the sensor with the cable, which you can add on when you buy the board, or if you've already bought the board and want the sensor, you can get it directly in our shop. There's a listing that's just like Easy Out sensor only that comes with the sensor and the cable. So our Easy Out sensor and the Creality / Solval sensors. Those are the two sensors that work. Now, while it is technically possible to get other filament sensors working, we don't support any other than those two because those are the ones we have tested and we know they work and we know they're not going to kill our board. Can we update the icons on the Chiron TFT? I haven't spent too much time with that machine. That's actually relatively soon in my queue because I want to get that machine into our farm and out of my garage. David Wilson, so the lengths are limited on the M600. So you can just go in and the answer is no, I'm not going to put that in there. We're trying to actually reduce the amount of all these like tiny little things you can change because a lot of people are getting overwhelmed when they see that. But because we do have the source code, if you want to make changes to your heart's content, you can download the source code and use VS Code to set up your firmware. The problem is we had, this one little thing here, one little thing there, one little thing there, it ends up making the setup process really complicated and confusing, especially for newer users. And the amount of people that want to change all those tiny little settings is relatively small compared to the entire user base. So, but my recommendation is if you want to change that, download the actual firmware from the Unified Firmware site, and then just edit it in VS Code. So, I think the load-unload length we have set for Bowden is 100 millimeters, and then there's also the direct drive, which I think sets it to 20, and then there's mounted, which sets it to 0. So, because if you have a filament sensor that's mounted and it tries to back it out, when you do a change filament, it could lock into the filament sensor arm, and it either binds up or cracks the filament. It's just not a good time. So, but I can show you, let me pull a copy of our firmware down here. Let me just make a local copy here, so just give me a minute. I'll show you where you can make the changes. Let's see, easy board, copy. Hang on, I'm just getting the local copy of this set up so I can open this in VS Code. Alright, so your load-unload settings are going to be in Marlin. So you're in VS Code. I opened the firmware for the easy board, so if I open this up, you got all your options here that you're used to seeing. But if you want to customize load-unload lengths, you can just do a search. Oh wait, no, not backend. Sorry, ADV. Configuration underscore ADV. I was like, where is it? Where is that going? So if you search advanced underscore pause, it'll take you to this section here, and by default it's 100. So if you want to change your load-unload length, you can put it here. If you want to change how fast or slow it unloads and loads, all these settings are here and the comments are still here. So if you want to modify this outside of what we have set, you can do that and then just compile. So if you want a 0, then you can just enable this option, mounted filament sensor, and that'll set it to 0. So we have these 3 settings, so 100, 0, and 20. There's a lot of stuff that I'd like to do and a lot of options I'd like to do, but at a certain point it gets too convoluted and complicated, and then we get more people that are confused by certain things. So at a certain point we got to draw that line of, okay, where, like, how far are we taking this kind of thing? How far does it make sense to? Are we going to create more work for us and create more confusion for our customers, that kind of thing? So, but the source code's available. You can do whatever you want with it. All right. Yeah, and then like I showed in the VS Code video, so once you actually, I'll just show you here. So let's say I want to make this 500. I can just change that number here. Do a Control S. You see the little dot over here goes away. Set your options like you normally would. Uncomment the line. So like, oh, I've got that. I've got I've got an easy out on here. I got an easy ABL. Save that, and then you just hit the little checkbox in the bottom here, and this is going to compile it. So this is the beta firmware, so hopefully this should be passing compile. But it's all in the same location, even on the one that's released right now. So you'll see it'll compile. Now this is a fresh copy, so it's going to pull down some libraries online to do the compile. You'll see it'll unpack, and that's going to move forward with the compile. My video might get a little choppy here once it actually starts compiling because Platform IO is just going to eat all my processors. So there we go. We're moving through the build here. Well, that compile, and I'll show you where to find the file, and the firmware.bin file that you copy to the SD card for the easy board. Anyways, there are directions on the site. So if you go to uf2.th3dstudio.com, there's a download link for the easy board, and that's the firmware you want to grab. And there are directions on that page. If I show you here. So if I go to uf2.th3dstudio.com, it takes you here. You can see the easy board. Click that, and then you can click here, and this will download the latest package. You see here, it's downloading the package. I'm going to cancel that. But here's directions right here, how to set it up. So set up VS Code, download firmware, extract the files, open the folder labeled firmware, uncomment the stuff, and then here's where you can find. So we do have directions in here specific to the firmware for the easy board. If we go back here, we can see, all right, so LPC 1769 success. So I go to the PIO ENVS folder, LPC 1769, there's a firmware.bin file. So if you take this file and drag it to your SD card, so if your SD card was open, you can just drag this into that window. Or if you want to go to the actual file, you can right click on this and then hit Reveal in File Explorer. And then here's a file here. So that would be the firmware bin to compile here. So, but then if you're compiling from here and not using the easy firmware site, you can change whatever you want to your heart's content. Just make sure if you do change something and it breaks something, remember what you did and revert that. So I can only guarantee that the firmware is going to work with our values that we have set. So if you're going in there messing with stuff and things stop working, make sure you're reading the error output here. You know, so like let's say I accidentally fat fingered a character here. They should throw an error. Yep, there we go. So see there, so I accidentally put an A there. Oh wait, I'm not sharing my screen. So I accidentally put an A here after the 500 and hit compile, and you see it threw all these errors. So you can see here, it's throwing an error here on this length here. So I'm like, oh, let's see. So this is on line 2107. Usually you'll get line numbers on certain things. But since I know I just messed with that, I can go back in here and be like, oh, okay, that was the last change I made, so I'm going to come back. And then if I hit compile again, it'll actually compile correctly. But that's about it. I appreciate you guys all stopping by. I hope you... Yeah, make a change and then compile one at a time. That's actually what I do when I'm changing stuff in the firmware. I'll make like one change, I'll compile, make a change, compile, so that way I know exactly what the issue was that caused it. So, anyways, I appreciate everybody that stopped by. We're at the 1 hour mark. So I hope you guys learned something, and if you guys do have other questions and you're just joining or you think of something later on, we have another Ask Tim. They're on Mondays and Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. So I will see you guys on Wednesday at 2 p.m. Central. So take it easy, everybody, and as always, happy printing. Bye-bye now.